Hey, what's happening, everybody? Figured I'd give an update here. I messed up a little bit. As you can see, the valve covers are off, and I'm going to explain my screw up, so maybe it helps somebody else. Because I'm new to some of this stuff. I mean, I've worked on cars plenty, but I don't get into motors too much, and this is my first heads cam swap. So, and with fancy lifters. So, big thanks to Dick out there. My buddy Dick hooked me up with some Morrell lifters, and they were like $200 lifters. They're linked. Dude, they're like $800 lifters. I was absolutely blown away after I Googled them. He didn't tell me what they were when he sent them. Anyway, when I put this together, I did check the pushrod length. However, I didn't do anything to the lifters when I checked the pushrod length. I simply put them in, put the heads on, bolted everything down, and then checked with the pushrod checker on the base lobe of the cam. So did that, came up with that measurement plus 0.070 was 7.395, and I had 7.40 inch lifters, inch pushrods. So I was good to go, right? So fired it up, car kind of ran, no tune, so it wasn't really a shock. But around 1500, 2000 RPM, you get a really loud, call it a knock, call it a tap. It's somewhere in between. So I took it for a ride to break the rear end in because the gears are new. And let me give you the video. This is no tunnel cover. The trans, with the phone down in like the hole for the trans. So it sounds super loud. It's not as loud in the car, but it's loud. It's definitely audible. So here's that video. On the gas, off the gas again. Got here with this. Wondering if that's valve check. All right, so you hear that? I throw the car up on the quick jack, and I get it to idle. Like it's idled twice ever. And I got underneath it, and man, it sounds like it's coming from the bell housing. So it does, the lifters were pretty quiet up here. All you really heard was injector. But back there, you could hear, that bang, 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 bang. And it would change on and off the throttle, the tempo, which is really strange. And why a lot of people thought valves, they thought I had like a stock lifter or something, which we haven't rolled out yet, but I'm getting to. So crawled underneath the car. My neighbor came over, fired it up for me while I was underneath it, so we stayed socially distanced. And this is what that looked like. It was terrifying. All right, so, my face is 6-7 inches away from the spinning clutch. But after I did that, obviously that sound didn't get louder, didn't get more obvious, so it wasn't in the bell housing. And man, it sounded like it was right between the, your headers come down right at the bell housing, and then right between those two, you have like the beginning of the torque tube. Well, the torque tube wasn't spinning because car was in gear and the clutch was in. But I swear that sound is coming out of the collectors on the long tubes, which is something in the motor. That's something up here going on. So, I'm exhausting all my resources, and pulling that inspection plate was a giant pain in the butt. You got to take the long tubes off. You got to take the mid pipe out. That gets you access to that cover, then put it all back together and run it. So that was kind of a waste of a couple hours doing that. Getting pretty fast at it, so that's cool. So then I come up here, and as you can see, I've got a rocker off, and that's not the only one that's loose right now. And the car had run like a couple hours previously, and I checked it with the pushrod checker, and I got a different measurement with the pushrod checker. And I went, oh, so that's wrong. So my measurement I got was shorter. I got 8.5 turns instead of 10.5 turns. So that's an issue. So I noticed also when I would push, you can smoosh the lifter a little bit. You get that spongy feel. So I started doing a little bit of research. Nobody really had a straight answer for me. Everybody has an opinion, but nobody was like, oh, what did you do this or whatever. So I went back to the install video that I watched when I did this, and what I basically did was I soaked the lifters overnight, threw them in the block, put the heads on, bolted everything up, and then I measured from there. Well, there's a thing you can do to LS lifters where you make them a solid lifter temporarily. You flip an internal piece. I didn't do that. And as such, I measured with the lifter fully compressed. So I took that measurement fully compressed, which is on these lifters, it's a 0.120 piston movement within the lifter. So 0.120, and I added 0.070 preload to it. So I am like double the preload at this point. So I'm 7.4s. That put me at 0.190 preload because I was preloading an already fully preloaded lifter. I didn't know. I'm learning, figuring it out. So what we think is going on is we think the valve is probably closing all the way, but late. And it's probably opening early. So I'm probably hearing that, explosions basically coming out the header. Which would also explain why it changes on and off the throttle. Off the throttle, you pull vacuum and there's no explosions. On the throttle, you're obviously, it's different. It's more violent and it's thumpier. So I went ahead and I'm hoping I did this right because I did it backwards. Put a push rod down in, and I did a couple cylinders just to make sure. Got it on the base cam lobe. Put push rod in, pushed it down, made sure it was seated all the way. Then I took my checker, and it ran 10.6. And it was 10.5, and that's the scotch pass, so I call it 10.6 turns out. So that gave me my fully 100% 1.2 or 0.120 preloaded length, and I want I think Brian Tooley calls for 0.1, and I think stock GM is 0.070. 7.3s put me at 0.90. If you subtract, so I was the length of that push rod was 7.330. So if you go to a 7.3, that pulls 0.030 out, and it gives me a preload of 0.090, assuming that was fully down. Basically, it's as close as I can get with a standard push rod. Pretty sure that's going to get me there. It puts me pretty dang close between 0.070 and 0.1, which should be in the right range. So definitely had the wrong push rods, and apparently that makes a pretty big difference. Just being that 0.1 off is a huge deal. So I did my due diligence and I measured before I installed all this stuff. I needed to do a little bit more reading. I'm doing it on my own. I'm learning. I've never had anybody show me this stuff. So, and a lot of times 7.4s work just fine for most setups. But unknown head, I don't know if it's had work done. Lifters are Morrell 5206s, I think. They're like an $800 lifter, so I don't know if they're something special as far as, their height. I mean, we're talking hundredths of an inch here, so that I've got 7.3s on the way from Brian Tooley. We'll swap those push rods out, fire it up, and I'm hoping that we have some success. We're just going to see, I guess. You can go shorter than 7.3, but if I go to a 7.275, it puts me at like 0.055 preload, which isn't enough. Assuming, of course, that fully compressed is 0.120. So unfortunately, it may cost me an extra $100 for push rods if I did this wrong, but at least I think we're heading in the right direction and we're figuring out kind of what's going on. The bad news is, well, good and bad news. Good news is if it fixes it, great, it wasn't a terrible fix. The bad news is I got to put that inspection cover back on. And kind of thinking about cutting it in half and just putting each side in because it's just an inspection cover. And pulling those headers is a pain, so we'll see. I'll figure it out. So that's where we're at, kind of at a standstill. I called the tuner and pushed him off and said, hey, I'll call you as soon as this thing gets running right. He was supposed to tune it this weekend, but I was like, man, there's no point. It's going to be all kind of messed up. So that's where we're at. Yeehaw. But we are approaching the end of this. I was worried. I'm like, is it rod knock? Is it something, catastrophic? But I'm pretty sure we just have this crazy pushrod issue. So I'll update. You know, I bet it takes a week or so for those to come in, and then I'll slam them in. It takes about an hour to put them in, and I'll update you guys. Hopefully, it fires up and we don't hear clunk 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 anymore. So, or tap 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 or whatever the heck that was. All right, guys, have a good one. Hope everybody's staying safe, and talk to you later.